Hello and welcome to the fourth Innovation Challenge. I'm very excited to be here with Stephanie Quarles and JP DeCure, both of them from Microsoft, both of them colleagues that I work very closely with. Stephanie, not as closely anymore. She went and took a new role, but Stephanie was instrumental in making this program happen. And JP has been a huge help since he's come on board with the team. Both of them are great speakers and can speak passionately about why we're here. And with that, let me just go ahead and ask you guys to introduce yourself. Stephanie, you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Hey, guys. Stephanie Quarles, been with Microsoft about 10 years now. As Matthew mentioned, most recently was on the Azure go-to-market team with JP and Matthew. Currently back in my jam with customer success with the manufacturing team. And the nice thing about that is I get to talk about all of our awesome Microsoft solutions, Azure, Modern Work, and Dynamics business applications. Really excited for today. This is dear to my heart. So I'll turn it over to you, JP.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. JP DeCure, longtime Microsoftie as well, a little over 17 years now. Many different roles, including some engineering roles and sales, working with customers. And in this particular subject, innovation is near and dear to my heart. When I think about, how do you sort of discover new ways to bring sophisticated technologies to bear to solve innovative problems? I love talking about this, so I'm excited to chat today.
And so, let's start off with, the purpose of this particular hackathon is, I've reached out to a bunch of organizations that can help us engage people who are from groups that are underrepresented in technology. If you're going to build a great AI platform, you need everyone using it, everyone contributing to it, the whole community involved. And so the idea is to specifically give, people an opportunity to build, AI solutions for real world situations, Azure customers, shine a spotlight on them. And it's very much about being, diverse and inclusive as part of who we are at Microsoft. JP, I'll let you go first on this one. Why do we want this group of people all getting together to do a hackathon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a fast pitch. I think right out of the gate, they're really good questions.
You got an answer to this, though. You know this stuff.
Well, I think that when we talk about why, and I mean, I interpret your question, why hackathons are useful and important. And I think, when we get a group of folks together to focus in on a particular kind of problem, I think sometimes folks think, we're gonna come together to solve the problem in the hackathon. And I think one opportunity that gets missed sometimes with hackathons is, you're actually probably looking to fail in really important, deliberate ways. And it's not so much about, we've got the eureka moment. I mean, that is sometimes what happens, and it's incredible when that does happen. But I think when we think about the nature of the approach to solving the problem, it's really about how to come together and think really, really carefully about, okay, what are some of the assumptions we're bringing to the table? What are some of the solution biases that we're bringing to the table? And then how do we challenge those as fast as possible? How do we get at that as quickly as possible? And what are the tools you bring to a hackathon that allow you to get at those questions? And that's usually, when you do that well, that's usually when you do come to that eureka moment. That's when the most amazing innovations occur. So yeah, I'll stop there and see if I've provoked any reactions.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I love how you led with that answer, JP, because I think it sort of segues into how I think about hackathons, which to me, when I hear the word hackathon, I think of intentional ideation, collaboration, and resolution to some issue or some groups of issues. And just like with any issue that we face in business and in life, man, isn't it great that you can capture a plethora of ideas, inputs, and expertise and insights from the left to the right of your experience? That's what I think about when I hear diversity and inclusion in these hackathons. It's more about what does Matthew bring to the table? What does Stephanie bring to the table? What does JP bring to the table? What does this person who is not even in close proximity to us bring to the table to help us solve for some of the world's biggest ideas? And that's why I love that Microsoft creates these opportunities, and not only creates them, but invites you and me and others to be a part of that intentional ideation, collaboration, and resolution for these issues and these causes. That's how I think about it. And JP's right. He's spot on with how he approached this conversation. I love how you kicked it off.
And I mean, when I, my experience as a judge has often been like, whoa, that's what they did with Azure. And then like, how did they do that? And I think that really, that gets to, throw out the solution bias.
Yeah.
It's like and so I'm going to, head on to my next question, which is about innovation. And I mean, kind of for the rest of the time here, I'll focus on sort of two of the judging categories: innovation and responsible AI. And these are where you can get a lot of points, half your points. And Stephanie's been a judge. So when it comes time for the judges to grade you on your innovation, they're going to give you a score from 1 to 10. And down there at the bottom at 1 is, I've seen this before. And then it kind of goes to, well, I haven't seen it done this way before, to, I haven't, this is going to change the way people do things, up at the end, like, whoa, this is from outer space. That's kind of the scale. But, when you're thinking about innovation in this context specifically, what's your, what's your advice to these hackers? How do they know they're on an innovative track?
Yeah. I know you guys hear this often, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. But like, not just think outside the box, throw away the box, right? Like, don't even box yourself in. Sure, there's some baseline criteria to this innovation challenge, but if you haven't seen it done, test it, try it, fail at it even, right? But fail fast, because the faster you fail at your ideas that are outside the box, the sooner you'll get to the one that ultimately is that novel idea that when we're judging and we're looking at this solution, we're looking at it through a lens of, I haven't seen this before. Man, this feels like this is going to resonate with multiple audiences. And this is pretty damn cool. Pretty damn cool stuff, right? So if you box yourself in, you're probably going to be in the middle of the road, because that's where the box sits, right? So my advice to you is be okay throwing away the box. If it doesn't fit, try something else, but definitely like ideate outside the lines and deliver something that you yourself would use and find valuable and that you think is just pretty cool stuff.
So JP, Stephanie talked about failing, and you talked about deliberate failure.
Yeah.
Do you build on that, or do you have more to tell us about innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I can build on that. Probably, unfortunately, for way longer than we have. But I'll say this. So there's a couple things, right? So on the failing part of this. So I remember when I was at the Stanford D School working on sort of design innovation as a technique, as a skill set. And one of the things that typically comes out of some of those design or D schools is when we say ideation, that notion of a divergent activity, right? So you as Stephanie said, you sort of think outside the box and you want to sort of get crazy. There's a couple things about that I think are important. The one that is probably, I don't know that it gets talked about enough, is the constraints. One of the things we used to do in some of these ideation sessions was we would create constraints in our ideation, and we would do crazy stuff like, okay, I want you to come up with as many ideas as you can, but they all have to cost at least $1 billion. or come up with as many ideas as you can, but they all have to include magic or involve Harry Potter magic or something like that. Like something.
I like to force people to use time travel.
Or time travel. That's a great one. Yeah. And we actually did that once, and we had an augmented reality solution that we came up with for a restaurant that involved projecting a restaurant's historical what the building was like historically. And so it would, as people were waiting, they would use AR to see so the actual app that we came up with involved augmented reality, but the ideation session started with the time travel constraint. But so that's one that's really useful, is that the value of constraints. And what it does is, like, if you're in that phase of the process and you're struggling to provoke ideas, that's a really effective tool. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would talk about with respect to sort of that kind of thinking or getting outside the box is how do you make sure that you converge appropriately? So there's a thought process around innovation that the innovation is the most, and we use it even as we say the term, hey, what's the most innovative idea? Sometimes our brain goes to what's the most forward-thinking idea. But I think one thing that's important when we look at evaluating the innovation is that it actually involves both the feasibility, viability, and the desirability components. And I know I'm speaking in D-school terms, so forgive me for that. But I think that's how I tend to categorize all the elements of what makes something innovative, is that it's not enough that it's telepathic interface. It's out there and it's the most frontier thinking. It's now we've converged around what is feasible, viable, as well as desirable. And so you've got to be able to do that iterative action. And then the last thing I would say to if you allow me to expand, I will. But
keep going. Yeah.
I'll at least put a pin in this point. Sometimes when we think about the idea of innovation, there's a myth around innovation that it is somehow you went from point A and you teleported to the future of this new idea. The best innovations, the most innovative thinking, is typically incremental. And so I think, Matt, you mentioned it, and I think Stephanie, you did as well. You kind of alluded to this. What brought us forward? I think sometimes people miss the incremental failure points that allowed us to tweak out the incremental steps to that future. And the most innovative things tend to be progressions on other ideas, sometimes good ideas, sometimes progressions on bad ideas. And so kind of looking for that deliberate opportunity and then kind of beginning to incrementally build and learn and fail and then tweak. Those are the best practices in terms of getting there. And I think working that into your hackathon motion, those tend to have the best possible outcomes at the end of the day.
I can imagine a very strong project submission to the judges. That, you know, these submissions start off with, here's what we're thinking about, here's our idea, here's what we wanted to do. And then you kind of get into, well, and here's what we did, here's how we got there, here's the architecture flow. And, you know, I think I've seen some winning projects that started with, well, we want to get this far. And you can't, you know? Right. And so then they very articulately and very focused, narrowed down, what can we get done? And they're like, so this is what we got done. This is the working proof of concept. And they'll have architecture diagram that's, that big. Then they'll show you one. This is where we want to go. And show us that. We want. I mean, that the judges like get on your side. Like, okay, I see where you're going. It's it might not be the most impressive little tiny proof of concept, but the concept is what we're looking for.
I think to that.
That goes to that viability and desirability that JP was just talking about, right? Even if you can't completely bake it for the deadline, show us the vision beyond the deadline. Is it viable? And will that ultimate outcome be desirable? Right? Like that's just as important.
I think also is, part of the hackathon is the whole community is coming together, and that's how development works. We all increase our capabilities. If you've got a great idea that just can't be done yet, share it with the community and let everyone figure it out. There's going to be a bunch of people from Microsoft looking at your, repo and thinking, I can see where Azure might need to help make this easier.
There's a lot of in the growing conversation around empathy and cognitive empathy. We talk a lot about this solution bias and cognitive bias and one of the things that people can lose sight of is sometimes when we share a problem, the cognitive bias shows up not just in the solution bias, but even in how we describe the problem. And so sometimes when you share the problem you want to solve and you have different perspectives on that, you'll get a reframing of the problem that changes how everybody thinks about the solution. And so it's really important to challenge. Like when we talk about bias as a barrier to innovation, it is not just like, I mean, it is the number one blocker for innovation. And so what you're really trying to do is figure out what are all the different ways we're looking at this that might be fixed, and how can we break that and then reframe and move forward. And so I think your point about share the problem, I think is important. Yeah, I saw someone comment on rubber duck thinking. I like that frame up. But yeah, I think that's an important point in that when you share the problems, because people will come to the table and they'll have a reframe that could change everything for you. I have some examples of that that are interesting, but I'll save that. And
well, actually, I'm going to jump over to my final question, and I'll put Stephanie in position because we'll go to her first. But the bias shows up in how we frame the problem. The responsible AI is 25% of the score here, and I always say, hey, responsible AI isn't about let's all just be good people, because we're all good people. It's Microsoft, right? We're like, we're going to have tools, we're going to have process, we're going to have fail-safe systems. We're going to ensure that these systems are responsible systems. And so I think, fairness there's six pillars of responsible AI, and fairness is the one I was kind of thinking most about. But one of the challenges is it's the autocorrect and prompt validation before AI execution. And which is an awkward way, I wrote it, so I'm sorry, but to say, be sure that people aren't putting bias into what they're asking. Be sure that people aren't using your AI system to do bad things. I think there's two other interesting, very interesting challenges that aren't directly related to that. One is about, change management in organizations use AI to help managers make better decisions when they're going into a big change management process. And boy, yeah, if you ask the wrong questions in that scenario, you could ruin a whole bunch of employees' lives for a long time. And then there's one on, supported employment job coaches, and how do we make their lives easier? It's a tough job. People who help other people who have, often cognitive disabilities, land their new jobs and get into those jobs and get productive in those jobs. So within these, these three areas, make sure people don't ask bad things to give us bad answers. Make sure that people don't make bad plans, and make sure that the people that help other people have the right help. How do you think about the responsible AI score, Stephanie? Because you've given this grade before, and you're an easy grader on if you get Stephanie as a judge for responsible AI, she'll go easy on you. But
I also have, I'm going to put a little PSA. My last 2 times judging, I've had a top 3, and then I had a first place winner. So
deserved.
Right.
Yeah.
Well deserved. But I love this question because it goes back to that inclusivity. But I'm going to use some words that I personally ascribe to responsible AI and how you look through that lens through your innovation with this challenge. Think of the other. Always have the other in mind. Be considerate of the other. That's how you are responsible. That's how we are responsible. So let me give you an example. One of the, I won't say whether it was a winning one or not, one of the challenges I judged, there was a submission on redaction. And it was sort of secure, from a security perspective. And one of the things that, as fantastic as the submission was, and I do think that there was some level of responsible AI in that submission, there were some other considerations that I think could have happened in that submission. For example, when the redaction capability was implemented, were people who may be seen challenged, right? Who maybe need TTL to read through content from an accessibility perspective, were they taken into consideration with this feature? Right? What does their experience look like? You and I, as seeing people, if I take my glasses off, I don't know, but with them on, you and I, as seeing people, Matthew and JP and those on the call today, we see the content redacted and it makes sense to us, right? There's things missing. But what if I'm seeing challenged, right? And maybe even what if I'm hearing challenged and I'm having this content read to me? What components have been thought of to make this experience desirable, right? And viable for me as J. I love those words. And so that's how I think about responsible AI. Responsible AI is just being considerate of others, right? And those people who may have experiences outside of your own, using that lens to just cross all the T's and dot the I's. And that's how I consider you being responsible. Does this experience and this capability lend itself to as many audiences as possible? That to me is a responsible AI success. And I would rate that high if I saw these things included in your submission.
JP, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Stephanie actually reminded me of something that I heard you say on a broadcast internally to a lot of people with an SEO. And you're talking about the importance of just, I won't go into the context, but, the problems of how do we take care of each other? And like, that stuck with me, And so, how do we build AI systems that help us take care of each other?
Yeah. I think I remember what we were talking about. And I think there's a general point to that. So you did mention most people, I mean, they're good people. They approach problems. Most people got into these fields to solve problems. They want to do something interesting and help people. And I think there's so much especially when we talk about the potential for artificial intelligence, there's so much potential in that, that this is omni-use technology. There's so much capacity for good, but I think obviously being omni-use, there's equal potential for bad. And I think how do we take care of each other is a great personal prompt. So when you're thinking about what you want to do, I think getting into the frame of mind, because Stephanie is kind of referencing there's a frame of mind you want to be in when you approach a problem and a solution, and that, how do you think about inclusion in a way that isn't just including yourself, but thinking about the exclusions deliberately. I think having that frame of mind of, okay, I have a take care of each other lens on. I'm thinking about the various audiences that I want to reach, and I think, when I say that, Matt, I think I am sort of thinking about how do we get into that, the right sort of sense of heart, that we are approaching what we do, and it's not a singular. We're not so singular in our thinking, and I think that can change everything for you. When we think about inclusion, I do think it's important to think about exclusion, right? Like, who am I potentially excluding, right? And asking and answering that carefully, and you do that with a care heart. I think you're in mindset. I think you are going to be more effective. It's not easy. Not to make this a therapy session for me personally, but I approach, my wife shows up with a problem, and I immediately want to start giving her the answers. I think that's a pretty cliche thing, especially for anybody who's married to an engineer. That's just sort of a natural reflex. But that isn't often the right way to approach the situation. And I think as engineers, as problem solvers, you want to show up in a way that is also thinking about, my answer might be exclusionary. And so that's how I would sort of think about that statement as you were sort of prompting me. It's as much about thinking carefully about where the exclusions are, and then flipping that bit. And here's a trick, and you can find this in Microsoft's inclusive design work. When we think about people with temporary exclusions and permanent exclusions, there are ways for you to, in your empathy in the process, be able to think, well, if I want to consider, what it's like to be, have a site disability or capability mismatch, you would be thinking, what are the times when I have experienced low vision, and what would that look like and feel like? And then translate that to, you were temporarily experiencing this. Then you can translate that to examples where you can then sort of use that to sort of think about what the permanent exclusions might look like. And all of those are relevant, by the way. Yeah. And I think those are ways to consider how you take care of each other and take care of how we apply artificial intelligence explicitly to really interesting, hard problems. Because, you could, the classic is, the AI that is somehow discriminating against a particular group. Yeah. And you would say, well, that was an unforeseen consequence. Getting in front of that is to imagine where we, as individual solution providers, are experiencing exclusion, and then we can apply some of that cognitive empathy to how we think about the solutions that we're creating.
That was great. I think I'll go ahead and just add a little bit more since I've got the buttons and I can kind of control.
You got the power.
In kind of a practical way, and I think a lot of what you said is very practical. When you're working through scenarios, like just come up with some little stories. Like, how does the system work if someone from HR is using it to filter out recruits? How does the system work if a bank person is filtering out loan applicants? How does this system work if, and just come up with as many different ways that human beings might do something. And for me, I've found one of the most helpful things about AI is to, how would this work if I was someone else, And so.
I love that, Matt.
Yeah. So it's been about half an hour. I said I wouldn't keep you guys too much longer. This was great. I think that hopefully it's given the folks in the audience a lot of ideas, or at least they can come back to it after they start getting stuck and things start blowing up. I hope that everyone has an awesome 2 weeks of hacking and learning. And, what I always tell people is, very soon you're going to be in a job interview and they're going to ask you, well, tell me, give me a story, give me an example of a project you worked on with other people where you solved a hard AI problem. Get ready for that question over the next 2 weeks. Because that's what you're going to have. You're going to have the answer to that question.
Great coaching. Yeah, that's spot on. That's spot on. And invite others to ideate with you, even if they're not in this hackathon with you. Your thought process and how you're solving for these solutions is a great conversation starter. It's a great community igniter, right? Microsoft wants to be known for this building and enabling developer communities, and we can't do it by ourselves. It does take you expanding the conversation beyond these walls. So we appreciate you guys.
And if you're lucky, you'll get Stephanie as a judge.
Deservedly.
Yeah, she can be pretty pointy too. So yes, thanks everyone. And really looking forward to seeing what you build.
Bye guys. Have fun.
Good luck.